All right, today we'll talk about some different things associated with memory that we started on Wednesday. So, first, we're going to describe how we are capable of retrieving information from our brain. That we have information in our brain, it's stored there, but there's different ways that we have to retrieve it. We also are going to analyze the influence that processes have on our ability to recall information. We'll also talk a little bit about the biology of memory. So, when we take a look at the brain, we have all these different lobes that are focused on different functions of our body and our mind. So, the short and long term of our memory is stored in what we call the cerebral cortex. All right. Now, the cerebral cortex stores both of these items. And you can see it's not the biggest area. It's right up here, the top part of our brain, next to the parietal and the frontal. And the emotional memories is attached to the amygdala. All right, so very tiny little section right in the middle of our head is the amygdala, and this being a really important key, because a lot of times if there's damage to the amygdala, then we cannot emote as well as we used to, and also different types of emotional memories get damaged. Now, when we talk about emotional, it could be positive emotions, negative emotions, anxious moments, anything that basically provides and elicits an emotion. We also transfer our memories through the hippocampus, right through here, kind of this curved area, kind of this pinkish purple. Now, if it's damaged, parts of our brain, only procedural memory can be remembered. So what we mean by that is when people have accidents or TBIs and they cannot remember certain events in their life, all right, maybe there's damage to the amygdala, the hippocampus, or the cerebral cortex, procedural memory can be remembered only. So, learning how to tie your shoe, learning how to drive again, all the different, how to make toast, how to cook eggs, different things that are procedures in our normal day-to-day life. So, quick little test. Take a look at these pennies that we have here. There's 15 pennies, and take about 10 seconds to look at the pennies and try to figure out which one is the exact right penny. All right, if you chose A, then you were correct, the very first one. A lot of times when we look at something over and over again, it is very difficult to really enjoy the different aspects or the finer things about what we are seeing. We know what a penny looks like. All these kind of resemble a penny. Maybe you knew right away the ones at the bottom were not, because they were facing left as opposed to right facing. So that is just one little trick we can do. All right, when we retrieve our information, we have something called recognition and recall. Recognition is when we identify an object that we have not experienced. So recognition, if you kind of think about it, your brain and your body is adapting to something that has not happened before. So if you first experience flight, you're on your first airplane ride ever. Well, this is not an experience you've ever had. Maybe you've been on a roller coaster before, but you've never experienced the magic of flight. So what your body and your brain is doing is recognizing this as a brand new experience, and it is storing it. So you might be able to revert back to your first flight ever, exactly what you were doing, how old you were, as opposed to your 15th flight or your 8th flight. That's not as big of a deal because we are recognizing new experiences. I remember the first helicopter ride I went on. It's very, very vivid because I have not experienced it, so it has easy recognition, very easy recognition for those moments. Then we also have what we call recall, reconstruct previously learned material. Recall is exactly what it seems like. You have these stored pieces of information of things that you've gathered over numerous years, and you need to pull it up every once in a while. So first we have reconstructive process, which we're altering and simplifying information. Confabulation, where we are filling in the memory gaps. We have schemas, expectations. If you recall what schemas mean, that means that we have certain things that are, in a set rules. I haven't dribbled a basketball in probably 2 years, but I have a schema, I have an expectation of how that happens. And then I'll use confabulation to kind of fill in those memory gaps of how to dribble properly, how to switch hands. All right. Then we have state-dependent learning, recall information in same psychological state, meaning that if we put ourselves into a similar situation than we've been in before, a lot of times those similar memories can adapt. So when we're in school, we can also sit down at a desk and say, oh, I remember sitting down at a desk when I was in 3rd grade. Or when I'm in a car, I'm driving, it's like, oh, I remember driving across country. Things of that nature. We also have problems when we forget, the inability to retrieve, recall, or recognize. So we have what we call interference. We have proactive interference, which is old information blocks new information. Then we have retroactive. New information blocks the old information. So they both work hand in hand. A lot of times this occurs when, for instance, when somebody has a lot of children, a lot of times the new experiences with their younger children, that are just born, sometimes can harm them and not remember the information from their first child, which would be kind of retroactive. Or you remember everything from your first child, their first 3 or 4 years, and the new child does not. You're not remembering the memories from your new child because you have proactive block. Then we also have what we call repression, probably a term you're familiar with, where we hide traumatic information. So you try to repress things, keep them deep down inside in order not to think about them. Retrieval cues, creating associations. All right, so let's say in 5 years when you come up for your 5-year anniversary, or in 10 years for your 10-year anniversary, you're going to drive up the hill and immediately you're going to have some retrieval cues. You're going to look at the trees and remember TP in the hill. You're going to drive and park in the parking lot and remember painting the junior wall, the senior wall in the junior lot. You're going to drive up the hill and park in the senior lot, and you might remember the tailgate, for basketball games or volleyball games, or TP in the hill. Then we have also what we call amnesia. We have retrograde, which is unable to recall events before onset, and anterograde, which is unable to recall events after onset. All right, some other things about forgetting that we can challenge forgetting is what we call flashbulb memories. We have some pictures up here of moments, in history, when JFK gets assassinated, when Richard Nixon resigns from the presidency, and 9/11. So those are what we call flashbulb memories, vivid recollections of emotionally charged incidents subject to inaccuracies change with retelling. So there probably are inaccuracies every time somebody retells it because that information gets a little bit more blurred. But for the most part, people always remember certain moments. Where were you when Elvis died? Where were you when JFK got shot or Martin Luther King got shot? Where were you when 9/11 occurred? And so on. These are what we call flashbulb memories. You can put yourself right then and there. So, why does forgetting occur? Well, we have a problem with what we call encoding. We gave the example of Admiral Nelson. We're coding Admiral, and that is allowing us to remember that. But a lot of times we'll forget what those items mean. State-dependent learning, tip of the tongue phenomenon, and also deja vu. Now, we're going to start with state-dependent learning. A lot of times we're never put in that same state. Remember we talked about, you got to be in that same state. You have to be sad. You have to be happy. You have to be in a car or sitting in a chair where you remember everything that occurs. the problem with state-dependent learning is that you have to be in that same state, and if you're not in that same state, then it's not possible for you to remember, so you're going to forget. Tip of the tongue phenomenon, it means literally it's right there. You just need some sort of cue in order to remember. And then finally, déjà vu, which is a French word that means already seen. So it's this kind of phenomenon where you have this feeling, sensation that you are experiencing something that has already occurred. Some, psychologists call it precognition, and it's a lot of times it's, really, really focused on this part of the brain that kind of triggers moments being recalled or recollection that are very, very similar, and they put them into experiences that feels like it's already happened before. There's been some research done, and they say healthy individuals, usually always experience deja vu, but a lot of times there's been some links to disorders, but a lot of it has been a little bit more unfounded. Photographic memory, forming detailed images and recalling the images later. And then eidetic imagery, ability for a child to hold on to detailed image of a material, something that almost all of us have, but some of us have it very strongly. And then finally, repressed memories. These are memories that can be very, very harmful to a child, to a person down the road, especially versus if it's a terrible moment. It's not the healthiest thing to occur. And then finally, eyewitness testimonies. We're going to do a little scenario on Friday where you guys are going to be an eyewitness, and we're going to watch a little bit of information about an eyewitness that a lot of times these criminals are falsely convicted, a lot of times because of eyewitness testimonies, and we're going to do that on Friday. I've not been recording. I seriously not been recording.